Have you ever met someone whose presence felt beautiful, but whose absence brought you peace? Some women enter your life not to build with you, but to quietly unravel the man you are becoming. This is not about hate or blame. It is about seeing clearly. Because in a world full of polished masks and charming illusions, the cost of blindness is your time, your spirit, and your peace. Today, we'll reflect on the signs you must never ignore, not to judge, but to protect your path. Stay with me. The clarity you find may change everything. 1. The perpetual victim. A sign you must never ignore. One of the clearest yet most often ignored signs of a problematic dynamic is a person's constant self-portrayal as the victim. I don't mean occasionally, I mean in every story they tell, in every chapter of their life. No matter how small or significant the event, they are never at fault, never the aggressor, never the cause, only the one who suffers. At first glance, this trait doesn't set off alarms. In fact, it might awaken your sympathy, touching something noble within you, the desire to protect, to heal, to offer stability where others failed. But what begins as empathy can quickly become entrapment. You meet her and she shares her story. The ex-husband who betrayed her, the friend who grew jealous, the employer who unfairly overlooked her talents. Her past becomes a litany of injustices, carefully crafted to paint a picture of a woman misunderstood, mistreated, and unappreciated. You listen and you want to believe her. You want to be the man who finally does right by her. But with time, you begin to notice something strange. The characters change, but the plot stays the same. Everyone else was toxic. Every fallout was someone else's fault, and every criticism she ever received came from people too small to understand her greatness. Let me tell you a story. A man I once knew, let's call him Tom, was one of those steady, good-hearted men who had built a life through quiet integrity. After his divorce, he met a woman who seemed open, expressive, even vulnerable. He admired her for that. She spoke openly about her pain, her past, and the injustices she had endured. Tom found her honesty refreshing. He thought he had finally found someone real. But over the following months, the tales of trauma kept coming. Every relationship in her life had ended in betrayal, every job in disappointment, every person in her orbit eventually had wronged her. At first, Tom tried to be the exception. He supported her emotionally, affirmed her sense of injustice, and tried to help her heal. But slowly, he realized he wasn't helping at all. He was being cast in a new role. He was no longer a partner. He had become either the cheerleader, who had to agree with her narrative at every turn, or the villain who was blamed for any disagreement, any boundary, or any honest moment of reflection. The dynamic had flipped. He wasn't with someone trying to grow. He was with someone committed to staying broken, so long as it let her manipulate others into carrying the weight of her emotions. This is where the true danger lies. A woman who clings to the role of the perpetual victim isn't seeking healing. She's seeking power through pity, and she wields it with astonishing precision. She will not grow, she will not reflect, she will not change. Instead, she will rewrite every situation to maintain her innocence, and anyone who challenges that narrative becomes a threat. If you stay, you will eventually become the next villain in her story. And when you do, she will tell everyone how you let her down, how you never really understood her, how you, like all the others, just added to her pain. This is not just exhausting, it is corrosive. Because when someone refuses to take responsibility for their actions, they will demand that you carry it instead. And over time, you will lose your peace. You will second-guess yourself. You will be pulled into arguments that make no sense, emotional storms you didn't cause, and moral dilemmas that leave you feeling like the bad person simply for setting boundaries. This is not love. This is manipulation disguised as vulnerability. The Stoics warned us about this long before psychology gave it a name. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But a woman who is always the victim refuses that power. She does not take ownership of her thoughts, her decisions, or the outcomes of her life. Instead, she hands all of that power to the world around her, and then blames that world for everything she feels. She becomes a black hole of blame and bitterness. And if you are close to her, she will pull you into that gravitational field. You will begin to orbit her emotions instead of living your own truth. You will spend more time explaining yourself than living in peace. And that is the first step toward losing your freedom. The Stoic response: clarity and self-protection. So what do you do when you recognize this pattern? The answer is not cruelty. The Stoic way is never rooted in vengeance or contempt. The answer is clarity. You see it for what it is. You understand that someone else's refusal to grow is not your burden to carry. You offer compassion, yes, but not at the expense of your well-being. You keep your boundaries. You do not engage in endless conversations trying to prove you are not the villain in her story. Because the truth is, her story was written before you even met her. All she needed was someone to play the role she had already assigned. When you sense that the stories never change, when you feel that your presence in her life only makes you more responsible for her pain rather than part of her healing, you step back quietly, firmly, and without guilt. Stoicism teaches that peace is not something others give us. It is something we cultivate within. And if someone repeatedly pulls you away from that peace, it is not unkind to walk away. It is wise. It is an act of self-respect. It is a choice to guard your mind, your soul, and your future from a cycle that cannot be broken from the outside. Do not let pity cloud your judgment. Do not confuse endless stories of suffering with depth of character. The deepest strength is not found in those who have suffered the most. It is found in those who have faced suffering and chosen to grow from it. The woman who is always the victim is not strong. She is rehearsed. And if you stay too long, you will learn that the real wounds were not the ones she described, but the ones she inflicted. So, choose clarity. Choose peace. Choose the strength that Stoic philosophy offers. The ability to see clearly, act justly, and walk away when chaos becomes the only language someone speaks. That is not abandonment. That is wisdom in action. 2. She is addicted to drama. The second sign of a problematic dynamic isn't always something you see immediately. You feel it in your gut. It's the subtle tension that never quite leaves the room, the strange energy that follows her like a storm. Cloud always on the edge of breaking. She is addicted to drama. This isn't about someone who occasionally gets emotional. We're all human, and we all falter from time to time. No, this is deeper. This is about a woman whose sense of self is tied to conflict, whose identity relies on chaos, whose emotional life only feels real when it's spinning out of control. You'll notice it in how her life always seems to be in crisis. There's always some betrayal, some insult, some enemy she needs to confront or story she needs to retell. If things get too calm, too peaceful, she will find a way to create tension. She might pick a fight over something trivial, reinterpret a neutral gesture as rejection, or suddenly feel deeply wronged by something you barely noticed. And when it begins, it escalates quickly. A peaceful evening turns into a battlefield. You find yourself confused, cornered, apologizing for something you don't fully understand, while she seems strangely energized. That's the first warning. When your exhaustion feeds her vitality, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance, and she is the director. This type of woman doesn't simply endure drama, she cultivates it. She needs it because in drama she becomes the center of the universe. When the world spins around her emotions, she feels powerful. Chaos gives her control. She creates storms, then demands your attention, your reaction, your energy to manage them. If you're not careful, you will spend your life not building peace but managing crisis after crisis, none of which you caused, all of which you are expected to solve. The Stoics understood this tendency well. Seneca wrote, "An angry man opens his mouth and shuts his eyes. This woman lives with her eyes closed to reason and her ears shut to calm. She doesn't seek understanding. She seeks sensation. She wants to feel something, even if that feeling comes at the cost of clarity, respect, or love. What she truly fears is stillness, because stillness demands self-reflection, and that's the one thing she avoids at all costs. There was a man I once knew, a strong man by all appearances, composed, kind, generous with his time. He met a woman who seemed passionate and exciting. At first, the energy felt intoxicating. She made life feel intense. Every day was alive with emotion. But soon he noticed a pattern. Whenever things felt steady, whenever he thought they were finally finding peace, something shifted. A sudden accusation, a cold silence, a confrontation over a misinterpreted comment. And each time he found himself pulled in, trying to fix things, trying to make sense of what had gone wrong, but nothing had gone wrong. She had simply grown bored with peace, and she had mastered the art of turning calm into conflict. He thought he was helping, that if he just communicated better, tried harder, stayed patient, he could soothe the waves. But that was the trap. He didn't realize he was never meant to solve anything. He was meant to participate in the cycle, to be her opponent when she needed a fight, her comforter when she wanted to cry, her witness when she needed to play the martyr. And slowly, he lost himself. His peace eroded, his energy drained. The man who once stood tall now lived in constant alertness, always wondering when the next emotional ambush would come. That's what drama addiction does. It steals your attention, your clarity, and eventually your strength. It turns your life into a series of reactions. As a Stoic, that's the opposite of your purpose. You are not here to be pulled by the chaos of others. You are here to master your mind, to stand grounded in the face of storms, to remain calm when others collapse into emotion. As Epictetus reminds us, we cannot control others. We can only control how we respond. The Stoic response: distance and as stillness. So how should you respond to a woman who is addicted to drama? The answer is not confrontation, that only feeds the fire. The answer is not endless dialogue that only extends the scene. The answer is distance. Not always physical, at least not at first, but emotional. You must step back from the performance. Refuse the role. Let the chaos unfold without joining it. Stay silent when provoked. Stay calm when accused. Stay still when she tries to spin the wheel. The power of the Stoic is in his ability to observe without becoming entangled, to witness the storm and choose not to walk into it. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise, because a man who loses his stillness loses everything. When you allow another person's emotional instability to dictate your mood, your thoughts, your energy, you give away the very thing that Stoicism teaches us to protect above all else, our inner state. And once that is gone, manipulation becomes easy. You become predictable, reactive, and powerless. The woman who is addicted to drama isn't looking for love. She is looking for a stage. And if you allow it, she will script your role. The nobleman, the betrayer, the redeemer, the enemy, whatever serves her moment. But your role is not hers to assign. You are not an actor in someone else's story. You are the author of your own piece. When you sense that her emotions are not seeking resolution but stimulation, when you realize that every calm moment is followed by a calculated storm, do not engage. Create space. Observe with clarity. Speak less. Move slower. Let the storm pass. And if the pattern never ends, if chaos becomes the norm, you must protect your life by walking away from the theater entirely. Stoicism doesn't call for indifference. It calls for discipline. It calls for you to choose reason over reaction, stillness over performance, peace over participation in madness. So the next time someone tries to pull you into their whirlwind, remember this: you are not here to be their emotional anchor. You are here to master your own mind, to build a life rooted in clarity, not chaos. When you refuse to be pulled into unnecessary drama, you reclaim your power. And in that act of refusal, you rise, calm, steady, unmoved, and absolutely free. 3. She controls through guilt. There is a silent weapon some women wield with remarkable precision, and it does not scream or strike. It whispers, it sighs, it retreats into silence at just the right moment, and leaves you feeling like you are the one who has done something wrong. The third sign that there may be a problematic woman next to you is this: she controls through guilt. It is not always loud. It is not always obvious, but it is effective because guilt, when used as a tool of manipulation, cuts deeper than anger. It makes you question your own choices. It turns your values into liabilities and your self-respect into something you feel you have to apologize for. Psychologically, guilt is one of the most powerful emotional forces we experience. Science has shown that the same parts of the brain that register physical pain light up when we feel guilt. That is why it weighs so heavily in your chest, why your stomach tightens, why your peace begins to vanish slowly with each encounter. It is not imagined, it is real. And the wrong kind of woman knows exactly how to make you feel it without ever raising her voice. At first you think she's just emotionally sensitive. Maybe you cancel dinner to finish a critical work project, and she reacts with subtle disappointment. Not accusations, just a long pause, a shift in tone, a quiet evening filled with silence where there used to be warmth. She says very little, but you feel everything. Or perhaps you tell her you want to spend some time alone, and what follows is not resistance, but a soft sigh that says more than words ever could. I thought I mattered more, is the message. I thought you were different, is the implication. And you begin to doubt yourself. So you adjust, you shift your schedule, you cancel that commitment, you choose not to see your friends, not because she told you to, but because you are trying to avoid that feeling, that shadow of disappointment that seems to settle over her when she doesn't get her way. You are not acting from love, you are acting from guilt. And every time you give in, every time you step away from your own boundaries to preserve her mood, you lose a small part of yourself. This kind of control is not overt. It is psychological, and that is what makes it so dangerous. There are no arguments, no demands, only moods, silences, expressions. She makes you feel like the problem without ever saying the words. And over time you begin to question your own character. You begin to believe that your independence is selfish, that your ambition is neglectful, that your desire for space is cruelty. She doesn't need to call you names. She lets you do that part yourself. I once knew a man who lived through this. At first he was full of life, disciplined, driven, full of clarity. Then he met her. She was soft-spoken, never aggressive. But somehow he always felt like he was letting her down. When he chose work, she grew quiet. When he wanted time alone, she became sad, not outwardly angry, just quietly distant. He began to change. He stopped making decisions for himself. He started asking permission for everything. Not because she asked him to, but because he had learned to avoid that sinking feeling. He had surrendered control without even realizing it. This is what the Stoics warn us against. When Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," he was pointing directly at situations like this. Guilt, when left unchecked, becomes a leash, and if you are not vigilant, someone will learn to pull that leash whenever they want something from you. You will think you are being kind. You will think you are keeping the peace. But what you are really doing is losing your center. The moment you start acting to avoid guilt, rather than to live by your principles, you are no longer free. The Stoic response: awareness and unwavering principles. The Stoic path offers a different response. It does not call for resentment. It does not encourage confrontation for the sake of ego. It calls for awareness, for clarity, for boundaries that are defined not by someone else's moods, but by your values. You give when it is right to give. You show up when it aligns with your purpose. And when someone tries to use guilt as a tool, you recognize it. And you do not react. You remain calm. You remain still. You do not allow emotional pressure to override reason. It is not your job to carry the weight of another person's insecurity. It is not your role to shape your life around someone else's inability to communicate directly. If she needs something, she can ask. If she is hurt, she can speak. But when her sadness becomes a silent accusation, when her disappointment becomes a constant shadow hanging over your decisions, you must step back and ask yourself this: am I making this choice because it is right, or because I'm afraid of how she will feel if I do not? There's a line between love and submission, between compassion and control. The woman who uses guilt to guide your actions does not want a partner. She wants a puppet. And every time you apologize for prioritizing your goals, your needs, your principles, the strings grow tighter. So what is the solution? It is not to fight her silence with noise. It is to bring stillness into the center of your decision-making. To return to reason, you must build a life based on clear, immovable values. You must know who you are, and what matters to you so deeply that no glance, no sigh, no silence can shake it. When you give, let it be from abundance, not from fear. When you adjust, let it be because your principles guide you to do so, not because you feel manipulated. And if the guilt keeps coming, if the emotional weight never lifts, you do not need to beg for understanding or demand change. You simply stop engaging. You stop apologizing for being yourself. You stop living in fear of her disappointment. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim something sacred, your freedom. A Stoic man is not hard, he is clear. He is not unfeeling, he is unmoved by emotional games. He acts from inner conviction, not external pressure. And in that stillness, that calm resistance to manipulation, he becomes untouchable. Guilt may knock, but it will find no door to enter, because a man who is the master of himself cannot be owned by anyone else, not even by the quietest voice of guilt. 4. She lacks empathy. The fourth sign that you may be standing beside a problematic woman is not something loud or obvious. It will not come with raised voices or clear betrayals. It reveals itself quietly, and often when you need presence the most. She lacks empathy, and you will only truly see it when life begins to weigh on your shoulders, because at some point, it will. No man walks through this world without facing loss, illness, betrayal, or failure. These moments do not ask for solutions, they ask for connection. They ask for someone who will sit with you, listen without judgment, and simply care. And that is precisely what she cannot offer. You will notice it first in subtle ways. You mention that you are exhausted after a brutal week. She glances up from her phone, maybe nods, maybe not, and within seconds, the conversation is about her co-worker's drama or her weekend plans. You tell her something personal, something that required courage to speak aloud, and instead of leaning in, she lets the moment pass as if it were no more important than the weather. You begin to feel it, the distance, not physical, but emotional. The sense that you're speaking into a void, that your pain echoes but never lands. It's not just that she doesn't understand, it's that she doesn't care to understand. I recall a story from a man I deeply respect. After losing his wife to cancer, he met a woman who seemed warm, engaged, and supportive. In the early days, she said all the right things. But as the gravity of his grief settled in, when he no longer needed words but presence, something shifted. He needed someone who could sit with him in the silence, who could let the sadness breathe without trying to fix it or rush it away. But she grew restless, impatient, uncomfortable. She would change the subject, offer shallow platitudes, and within moments the focus returned to her. Her stress at work, her plans for the weekend, her emotions. Eventually, he told me, he realized he felt lonelier beside her than he did when he was entirely alone. That is the wound that a lack of empathy inflicts. You're not merely unsupported, you're unseen. You find yourself shrinking in your own life, second-guessing whether your emotions are valid, whether you are too much. And that is the most dangerous place a man can be. When you begin to convince yourself that needing care, understanding, or presence makes you weak, it does not. It makes you human. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And I would add to that this: waste no more time hoping someone will become what they are not. Empathy is not a skill that can be taught in adulthood. It is not a behavior you can request like a favor. It is either present in a woman's soul or it is not. And when it is missing, you will know. You will feel it not in your mind, but in your bones. You will look into her eyes and realize that you are speaking from your heart to someone who is no longer listening, or perhaps never was. Empathy is not always about having the right words. It is not about saying, "I understand," or offering advice. It is about presence, stillness, attunement. It is the kind of love that holds space rather than fills it. A woman who possesses true empathy will not need to perform. Her care will be steady. Her quiet presence will say more than rehearsed comfort ever could. When you are broken, she will not rush to rebuild you. She will sit beside the wreckage without fear, without flinching. And in that stillness, you will feel safe. A woman who lacks empathy may sit in the same room as you, but emotionally she is miles away. She will talk about loyalty, but disappear when your spirit is low. She will call herself supportive, but only when it is convenient. And when life turns dark, she will step back rather than walk forward with you. You may catch yourself making excuses for her, telling yourself she is just distracted or going through something, but deep down you will know the truth. And the truth is this: she simply does not care enough to meet you where you are. The Stoic response. Facing reality and choosing authenticity. Stoicism teaches us to see reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. We are not asked to carry resentment. We are asked to carry truth, and the truth is simple. If she cannot hold space for you when you are hurting, she will never stand beside you in the storms ahead. Because life will bring more. No matter how strong or successful you are, the world does not exempt you from pain. What matters is not how she behaves when life is easy. What matters is who she becomes when it is not. So what do you do when you recognize this absence? The answer is not to plead for more, not to demand her presence like a reward. The answer is to choose differently, to walk away, not out of anger, but out of clarity, to protect the sacredness of your pain. Your grief deserves dignity. Your struggle deserves to be witnessed, and your heart deserves to be met with real compassion, not transactional care. It is better to walk alone in silence than to sit beside someone who cannot hear your soul. Your strength as a man is not measured by how much pain you can bury. It is measured by how honest you are about what you need. And if you need empathy, ask for it without shame. And if it is not there, do not stay in search of it. Let the absence teach you what the presence of a good woman should truly feel like. The end. Life is too short, too precious, and too demanding to share with someone who listens with their ears, but not their heart. You are not weak for needing connection. You are wise for recognizing who cannot give it. And when you walk away from a woman who lacks empathy, you are not losing love. You are reclaiming peace. That is what the Stoic path offers, not a life without feeling, but a life with depth, truth, and the quiet strength of knowing who truly sees you. Choose that and never settle for anything less. 5. She is obsessed with superficial things. The fifth sign that reveals the presence of a problematic woman is deceptively easy to miss, especially in a world that celebrates appearance more than substance. She is obsessed with superficial things. And I don't mean she simply enjoys beauty or appreciates quality. This is a woman whose entire sense of self is rooted in the external, in the visible, in the praise of others, and the glitter of what can be flaunted. Her measure of life begins and ends with what can be seen, owned, displayed, envied. The house, the purse, the car, the brand, the photo. The applause of strangers matters more than the intimacy of a true connection. The image is everything. The soul forgotten. At first it seems harmless. After all, who doesn't enjoy a nice place to live, a beautiful dress, a polished life? But with time, you realize this goes deeper. It's not the things themselves, it's the meaning she attaches to them. To her, possessions are not tools to enjoy life. They are tools to outrank others. They are status symbols, not treasures. And in this world she lives in, everything becomes a competition, not just with others, but eventually with you. You will begin to feel it. The subtle pressure to earn more, to give more, to become more. Not in character, but in wealth, not in values, but in valuables. You may have thought your steady job, your reliable truck, your honest life were enough. But beside her, they begin to feel like failures because someone else has more. And her eyes, her comments, her discontent will remind you of that. Whether you make 6 figures or 7, it will never feel like enough because her sense of satisfaction does not come from within. It depends entirely on how high she can climb in the eyes of others. The Stoics spoke against this kind of thinking with unwavering clarity. Epictetus wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions but in having few wants. And yet this woman lives in a state of constant craving. The next bag, the next trip, the next party, the next compliment." But no matter how much she gets, it never quiets the restlessness inside her, because what she truly chases is not luxury, but validation. And that kind of hunger has no end. It is like pouring water into a cracked jar. It leaks as fast as it fills. I remember a friend who dated a woman like this. She was radiant, magnetic, always put together. At first, he admired her ambition, her style, her ability to move with confidence through high society. But over time, he began to see the cost. Every dinner had to be at the right place, every gift had to impress. Every moment was curated for others to see. And behind closed doors, he realized something heartbreaking. She did not truly see him. She only saw what he could provide. His value to her was transactional. His kindness, his character, his loyalty were not enough because they could not be posted, praised, or worn on her arm. This is the danger of a woman obsessed with the surface. She will never reach below it. She will never understand the depth of character, the quiet dignity of a man who lives by principle, the strength it takes to remain calm in a noisy world. These things are invisible, and therefore, in her eyes, they are worthless. Marcus Aurelius taught that externals are indifferent, meaning they do not change who you are. A bigger house does not make a wiser man. A designer bag does not make a kinder soul. Character is what matters. Virtue, integrity, discipline. And if a woman cannot see these things, it is not because they are hidden. It is because she has trained her eyes only to see the glittering surface. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." And that is the truth here. The woman who worships at the altar of appearances may seem successful, but inwardly she is impoverished. Because peace does not live in brands or bank accounts. It lives in simplicity, in meaning, in knowing what truly matters and letting the rest go. The Stoic response, prioritizing substance. Overshow if you find yourself beside a woman who judges you by what you wear more than what you stand for, who measures your worth by your wallet instead of your wisdom. Understand this. You are not in a relationship, you are in a transaction, and no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. Because the void she is trying to fill is not your responsibility to manage. It cannot be satisfied by money, only by maturity. And maturity is not something she seeks because it cannot be photographed. The answer is not resentment, it is clarity. If you value peace, depth, and the richness of a life lived with meaning, you cannot share your path with someone chasing shadows. You will lose yourself in the performance. Your energy will be drained. Your soul will feel unseen, and your purpose, which Stoicism demands you protect above all else, will be quietly eroded by the constant pressure to prove, to provide, to impress. So walk away, not because you're angry, but because you are wise. Because a Stoic man knows that peace is not found in what glitters, but in what lasts. And only a woman who lives with depth can walk beside you without pulling you into the shallow. Choose her and leave the rest behind.